She was dragged from the kitchen screaming. The Mafia boss tasted the soup and said, "She's mine." Those words echoed through the prestigious Ocean View Hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, forever changing the lives of everyone present that fateful evening. Astrid Novak kept her head down as she chopped vegetables with practiced precision, her knife moving in a rhythmic dance across the cutting board. The kitchen buzzed with frantic energy around her, chefs shouting orders and pans clattering as Newport's elite waited for their 5-star meals. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, "Food isn't just sustenance. It's a language for those who can't speak their pain." Astrid poured that philosophy into every dish, especially her signature seafood bisque that carried hints of the small coastal town where she grew up. Chef Philippe stalked the kitchen like a predator, his white coat immaculate compared to the splattered uniforms of his subordinates. His eyes narrowed whenever they landed on Astrid, a mixture of contempt and something darker swimming in their depths. The restaurant within the historic Ocean View Hotel served as a playground for power brokers, politicians, and those who operated in the shadows between legality and chaos. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across white tablecloths where deals were made with handshakes firmer than any written contract. Astrid had secured the position through sheer talent rather than connections, a fact that Chef Philippe reminded her of daily through casual cruelties and impossible demands. Her calloused hands told the story of her journey from a small-town diner to this temple of culinary excellence. The special order came in at 8:17 p.m., a request from the private dining room overlooking the Atlantic. "Table 7 wants something not on the menu," the server whispered, sliding the note toward Astrid with nervous eyes. The handwritten request simply read, "Something that tastes like home." No specifics, no ingredients listed, just a cryptic request that made Chef Philippe scoff and delegate the task to Astrid as punishment for her earlier praise from a regular customer. "Make whatever garbage you want," he hissed, leaning close enough for his cologne to overpower the kitchen aromas. "When it fails, perhaps you'll finally understand your place in my kitchen." Astrid closed her eyes for 3 heartbeats, centering herself before reaching for ingredients that spoke to her soul, rather than the menu. She chose wild-caught Atlantic scallops, local herbs from the hotel's rooftop garden, and her secret blend of spices carried in a small tin always tucked in her pocket. The soup came together like a symphony, steam rising as cream swirled into the broth, transforming the liquid from transparent to opaque with a single turn of her wooden spoon. She hummed softly, unaware of the curious glances from her fellow chefs who had never seen such calm amid the kitchen chaos. When completed, the bisque glowed a soft amber under the kitchen lights, smelling of ocean breezes, comfort, and something indefinable that made the server's eyes widen upon collection. "This smells incredible," he murmured, before whisking it away to table 7. 20 minutes passed in a blur of orders and preparations, before Astrid noticed the unusual stillness spreading through the kitchen. Staff members exchanged glances, conversations dying mid-sentence as a tall figure appeared in the doorway. He wore a tailored suit that couldn't quite disguise the hardened physique beneath, his presence commanding attention without effort. Cold blue eyes scanned the room methodically until they locked onto Astrid with an intensity that froze her in place. "Who made the soup?" His voice was surprisingly soft, carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't place. The question hung in the air for several heartbeats, before Chef Philippe stepped forward with a practiced smile. "I oversee all dishes in my kitchen," Chef Philippe began with a flourish, only to be silenced by a slight raise of the man's hand. The gesture was minimal, yet carried enough authority to make the celebrity chef step backward. "I didn't ask who oversees," the man stated flatly, his gaze never leaving Astrid's face. "I asked who created that soup, the one that tastes like memories I've never had." Before Astrid could respond, Chef Philippe's face contorted with rage as he grabbed her arm with bruising force. "This nobody thinks she can experiment in my kitchen," he spat, yanking her toward the dining room. "See what your little creation has done?" Philippe shouted, dragging Astrid through the swinging doors and into the elegant dining area, where conversations halted instantly. "You've disturbed our most important guest with your peasant food." Astrid stumbled as Philippe continued pulling her across the polished marble floor, tears of humiliation burning behind her eyes as diners watched the spectacle with expressions ranging from shock to morbid fascination. Her chef's coat was coming untucked, her dignity unraveling with each step. The mysterious man from table 7 rose from his seat with deliberate slowness, his movement causing several nearby security personnel to straighten to attention. He approached with measured steps, stopping directly in front of Astrid and the still ranting chef. Without a word, he took a spoon from a nearby table setting, dipped it into the remaining soup in his bowl, and tasted it again, closing his eyes briefly before fixing his gaze on Chef Philippe. The entire restaurant held its collective breath, sensing the tension crackling between them. "She's mine," he stated with quiet finality, the two words carrying more weight than a shouted declaration. His hand gently but firmly removed Philippe's grip from Astrid's arm, the action speaking volumes about boundaries newly established. In the silence that followed, Astrid could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, confusion and fear warring with an unexpected sense of safety emanating from the stranger who had just claimed her in some indefinable way. The restaurant manager appeared, summoned by an imperceptible signal from the man. Nikolai Volkov had arrived at the Ocean View 3 days earlier, his presence transforming the atmosphere of the historic hotel with subtle but unmistakable shifts. Staff stood straighter, security doubled, and the hotel's most exclusive floor was cleared for his entourage. Newport's whisper network buzzed with speculation about why the notoriously private businessman had chosen their coastal city for his rare American appearance. Some said it was for legitimate maritime business interests. Others murmured about darker matters requiring his personal touch. The hotel manager wrung his hands as he addressed the restaurant crowd, his voice carrying false confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy complimentary champagne while we prepare private accommodations for Mr. Volkov's dinner party." Astrid found herself being guided toward the rooftop terrace, her mind still struggling to process the rapid sequence of events that had extracted her from public humiliation. The elevator ride was silent. The man, Nikolai, keeping a respectful distance despite his declaration. The Atlantic stretched before them like spilled ink when they emerged onto the terrace, stars reflecting off the water's surface in tiny pinpricks of light. Heating lamps created pockets of warmth against the October chill, their glow illuminating the private dining setup waiting for them. "You're afraid?" Nikolai stated rather than asked, pulling out a chair for her at the table. "That's understandable, but unnecessary. I only wanted to speak with the person who created such an extraordinary dish." Astrid's hands trembled slightly as she sat, years of kitchen discipline keeping her spine straight despite her confusion. "I don't understand what's happening," she admitted, her voice steadier than she expected. A server appeared with a bottle of wine, pouring 2 glasses before disappearing with practiced invisibility. Nikolai made no move to touch his glass, instead studying Astrid with curious intensity. "Do you always cook like that when you're sad?" he asked, the question so unexpected that Astrid nearly knocked over her untouched wine. His eyes revealed genuine interest rather than the predatory gaze she had braced herself for. "How could you possibly know that?" she whispered, the night breeze catching her words and carrying them across the terrace. The question exposed vulnerability she hadn't intended to reveal to this dangerous stranger. Nikolai's expression softened almost imperceptibly, the hardness around his eyes easing for a moment. "Because my mother cooked the same way," as if every dish might be her last chance to speak her truth to the world. The comparison unlocked something in Astrid. Memories of her grandmother's kitchen table where love was served alongside humble meals during difficult times. "Food remembers, even when people try to forget," she found herself saying. Nikolai nodded, finally reaching for his wine and taking a measured sip. "Your soup spoke of loneliness, of standing apart even in crowded rooms, but also of hope that refuses to die despite everything." The moonlight cast strange shadows across the terrace, turning the ordinary into something mysterious. Astrid felt as though she had stepped into an alternate reality, where powerful men discussed emotions through culinary metaphors. "Chef Philippe will have me blacklisted from every decent restaurant on the East Coast after tonight," she said, the practical concern breaking through her disorientation. Her modest apartment was already behind on rent, her cooking position her only lifeline. "Philippa no longer works here," Nikolai stated with such calm certainty that Astrid knew it to be absolute truth rather than wishful thinking. The hotel management agreed that his behavior was unacceptable for an establishment of this caliber. A chill ran down Astrid's spine that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. The casual way he spoke of ending someone's career revealed the depth of his influence, reminding her of exactly what kind of man sat across the table. "What do you want from me?" she asked directly, deciding that clarity was preferable to polite confusion. Her grandmother had always said courage was found in asking the questions others avoided. Nikolai studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dancing shadows cast by the terrace lanterns. "Initially, just to thank the person who created something remarkable," he answered carefully. "And now?" Astrid pressed, sensing the unspoken remainder of his thought hanging between them. The night seemed to hold its breath as she waited for his response. "Now I find myself curious about someone with your talent working under a mediocre tyrant, living in fear rather than creating freely," he replied, his accent becoming more pronounced with each word. The wine tasted expensive on Astrid's tongue when she finally took a sip, liquid courage warming her from within. "Not everyone has the luxury of choice, Mr. Volkov. Some of us take what opportunities we can find." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Call me Nikolai," he said, "and perhaps choice is exactly what I'm offering you." The distant sound of waves crashing against Newport's famous cliffs filled the silence between them, nature's rhythm continuing regardless of human drama. Astrid waited for elaboration, sensing that patience would reveal more than questions. "I own several establishments that could benefit from your particular talents," Nikolai continued after a moment. "Places where creativity is valued over arbitrary rules and petty tyranny." Astrid's mind flashed with warnings. Deals with devils, strings attached to gifts, the danger of owing someone like him. "And what would be expected of me in return?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Initially, nothing but your best work," he answered with unexpected simplicity. "I believe in investing in rare talents without stifling them. Beyond that, we would negotiate terms that benefit us both." Morning light filtered through the unfamiliar curtains of Astrid's hotel suite, a room more spacious than her entire apartment. She hadn't accepted Nikolai's job offer outright, but had agreed to his suggestion of temporary accommodations while considering her options. The knock at her door revealed a hotel staff member with a handwritten note requesting her presence in the hotel's main kitchen at her convenience. No signature, but the elegant stationery left little doubt about the sender's identity. The kitchen staff fell silent as Astrid entered, their curious gazes following her movement across the polished floor. Word had spread about last night's incident, transforming her overnight from invisible line cook to subject of intense speculation. "Ms. Novak," the sous chef approached with newfound respect, "we've been instructed to provide you with anything you require for today's special project." His eyes conveyed both curiosity and apprehension about the mysterious task. Astrid felt strangely calm as she tied a fresh apron around her waist, accessing a confidence that had always existed in her relationship with food, if not with people. The kitchen was a language she understood fluently, regardless of its size or prestige. She began with a market trip, accompanied by a silent security guard who maintained a discreet distance as she selected fresh seafood from local fishermen who had just returned with their morning catch. The scallops were still glistening with seawater as she inspected them. The herbs came next, not from sterile grocery displays, but from an elderly woman's garden stand at the farmer's market, where gnarled hands tied bundles of thyme and rosemary with practiced efficiency. The woman smiled knowingly at Astrid's careful selections. Back in the kitchen, Astrid created a sanctuary of focus amid the bustling activity, her movements deliberate yet flowing as she prepared each ingredient. She crushed peppercorns with the flat of her knife, releasing their aroma into the air like an offering. The stock simmered slowly, bones and shells surrendering their essence to the liquid that would form the soup's foundation. Astrid stirred occasionally, her grandmother's wooden spoon traveling with her from kitchen to kitchen like a talisman. When she added cream to the broth, it transformed from transparent to opaque in a swirling dance that never failed to mesmerize her. The kitchen staff had stopped pretending to work, now openly watching her process with professional curiosity. Astrid hummed softly as she worked, an old lullaby her grandmother sang while teaching her to cook during those difficult years after her parents' accident. The melody carried memories of safety that infused themselves into the developing flavors. The final touch was a sprinkle of smoked sea salt, harvested from the Atlantic, a gift from the fisherman who had sold her the scallops after hearing about her special project. "This carries the essence of our waters," he'd said with weathered pride. When the soup was complete, Astrid ladled it into a simple white bowl, garnished it with a single edible flower, and stepped back to observe her creation. It wasn't just food. It was autobiography in liquid form, her past, present, and possible futures distilled into essence. The sous chef approached tentatively, inhaling the aromatic steam rising from the bowl. "I've never seen someone cook with such intention," he observed, searching for the right words to describe what he'd witnessed. "My grandmother taught me that ingredients remember the hands that touch them," Astrid explained, wiping her hands on her apron. "If you cook with anger or fear, those emotions become part of the meal." A hush fell over the kitchen as Nikolai entered, his presence commanding attention without effort. Today he wore a more casual outfit, charcoal slacks and a navy sweater that somehow looked as authoritative as yesterday's tailored suit. He nodded acknowledgments to the staff before turning his full attention to Astrid and the creation waiting before her. "You didn't need to recreate it," he said, genuine surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't," Astrid replied with quiet confidence. "This is its evolution. Same soul, different expression." She gestured toward the bowl, inviting him to taste the result of her morning's work. Nikolai's security detail exchanged glances as he took the offered spoon without hesitation, their training at odds with his apparent trust in the woman they'd only just met. His expression remained neutral as he tasted the soup, only his eyes revealing the impact. "When I was a boy," he began after a thoughtful pause, "my mother would save scraps all week to make Sunday soup for our family. She could create abundance from almost nothing." The kitchen staff pretended to return to their duties, ears straining to catch this rare personal disclosure from a man known primarily through whispered rumors and business headlines. Astrid remained still, recognizing the offering of personal history as significant. "Your soup yesterday reminded me of her gift," Nikolai continued, his accent thickening with memory. "But this is something entirely new while somehow remaining familiar." Astrid nodded, understanding precisely what he meant. The culinary paradox of innovation rooted in tradition, the balance every serious chef sought, but few achieved. "Food should honor its origins while finding new expression," she said. Nikolai studied her for a moment before making a decision. "I'm hosting a private dinner tonight for business associates. They've traveled far and carry the weariness of difficult negotiations. Would you consider creating the menu?" The request was presented as a genuine question, rather than the command Astrid might have expected from someone of his position. The choice was clearly hers, a small but significant respect that didn't go unnoticed. "I'd need complete control of the kitchen and menu," she found herself saying, surprising even herself with the boldness of her conditions. The sous chef nearby nearly dropped the pan he was holding. A flash of amusement crossed Nikolai's features, there and gone in an instant. "Of course," he agreed without hesitation. "Consider this kitchen yours until midnight. Whatever staff and ingredients you require are at your disposal." Astrid felt a thrill of both excitement and terror course through her veins at the opportunity and responsibility suddenly before her. 7 years of working under tyrannical chefs had prepared her technically, but this was her first true creative freedom. The private dining room overlooking Newport Harbor gleamed with understated luxury as Astrid made final preparations for Nikolai's business dinner. Crystal glasses captured and refracted the sunset's golden light, while white orchids floated in shallow bowls along the center of the table. Unlike the chaotic shouting matches of Chef Philippe's kitchen, Astrid had orchestrated her temporary staff with quiet efficiency, earning their respect through skill rather than intimidation. They moved now with synchronized precision, placing the first course at each setting. Through the kitchen doors, Astrid could glimpse the arriving guests, 5 men and 1 woman, all carrying themselves with the distinctive confidence of people accustomed to power. Their curious glances toward the kitchen suggested they'd been informed about the evening's special chef. Nikolai made brief introductions as they took their seats, his hand gesturing subtly toward the kitchen in acknowledgement of Astrid's role. Though she couldn't hear the words, she recognized the shift in the guests' expressions from polite interest to genuine curiosity. The first course, a delicate scallop crudo with citrus and sea salt, emerged from the kitchen on chilled plates that showcased the translucent seafood like jewels. Astrid watched through the partially open door as the guests registered their first taste. Conversation momentarily halted. The woman, whose sharp features and calculating eyes marked her as perhaps the most formidable person at the table, was the first to speak after tasting. Her approving nod toward the kitchen sent an unexpected surge of validation through Astrid. Course after course emerged from Astrid's temporary domain, each telling part of a culinary story that built upon the previous offering, from earth to sea to farm and back again. The rhythm of service flowed like a well-orchestrated symphony under her direction. Between courses, Astrid caught glimpses of the business discussion. Serious faces, occasional tension, moments of apparent breakthrough. She noticed how Nikolai guided rather than dominated the conversation, his power evident in how little he needed to assert it. The main course featured locally caught black bass served over a saffron risotto that had required 3 days of specialized preparation. As plates were cleared afterward, Astrid heard genuine compliments filtering back to the kitchen from even the most stoic of the guests. She was garnishing the dessert plates with edible gold leaf when the kitchen door swung open unexpectedly. Chef Philippe stood in the doorway, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. His uniform rumpled as though he'd been wearing it since his dismissal. "So this is where the little nobody has been hiding," he slurred loudly enough for his voice to carry into the dining room. The kitchen staff froze, spatulas and piping bags suspended mid-motion, as tension instantly electrified the air. Astrid straightened, forcing her hands not to tremble as she set down the delicate dessert she'd been preparing. "This is a private function, Chef. You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, hoping to diffuse the situation before it escalated. Philippe's laugh held no humor, as he staggered further into the kitchen, pointing an accusatory finger at Astrid. "You think you've won something, don't you? Seducing your way into the good graces of some gangster while real chefs lose everything?" The kitchen staff edged toward the walls, creating distance from the confrontation, while security guards appeared at the doorway, alerted by the commotion. Astrid remained rooted in place, unwilling to show the fear climbing up her spine. "I worked 15 years to earn my position," Philippe continued, his voice rising with each word. 15 years of blood and burns and sacrifice. And you think you can just waltz in with your pretty face and steal it all? Before Astrid could respond, Philippe lunged forward and swept his arm across the dessert station, sending meticulously crafted chocolate sculptures crashing to the floor in a cacophony of destruction. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the kitchen. "This is what your food deserves," he shouted, grabbing Astrid's arm with bruising force and dragging her toward the dining room. "Let your new patron see what a fraud you really are when you can't hide behind other people's recipes." Astrid struggled against his grip, wincing as his fingers dug into the same spot he'd bruised the previous night. Kitchen staff moved to intervene but hesitated, uncertain about physically engaging with the former executive chef. "You're nothing but a country peasant playing dress-up," Philippe hissed, yanking her through the swinging doors and into the private dining room where conversations halted instantly. "Tell them where you really came from, the greasy diner where you learned to flip burgers." The distinguished guests turned toward the disturbance, their expressions ranging from shock to cold assessment. Nikolai slowly set down his napkin and rose from his chair, his movement causing security personnel to step forward from their positions along the wall. "Gentlemen, Ms. Kassoff," Nikolai addressed his guests with perfect composure, "please excuse this unfortunate interruption. It appears the hotel's former chef is having difficulty accepting his termination." Philippe's grip tightened painfully as he pulled Astrid further into the room, his alcohol-fueled rage overriding any sense of self-preservation. "This woman is a fraud. She's been serving you stolen recipes and pretending they're her own creations." Astrid felt tears of humiliation burning behind her eyes as she struggled to maintain her dignity before these powerful strangers. The female guest, Ms. Kassoff, observed the scene with analytical detachment, as though assessing a business proposition rather than human drama. "She was nothing before I gave her a chance in my kitchen," Philippe continued, spittle flying from his lips as his rant gained momentum. "Just another desperate girl willing to do anything for a position in a real restaurant." Nikolai's expression didn't change, but something in the air around him seemed to darken, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The security team tensed, awaiting a signal that had not yet been given. "I believe you've had enough to drink, Chef," Nikolai stated, his voice deceptively mild as he approached. "And you're incorrect about Ms. Novak. She has created every dish served tonight, without reference to your or anyone else's recipes." Philippe's laughter held a manic edge as he tightened his grip on Astrid's arm, causing her to wince visibly. "You've been fooled by a pretty face. This little nobody couldn't create an original menu if her life depended on it." "Release her," Nikolai commanded, the softness of his voice somehow making the order more threatening than a shout would have been. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as tension thickened the air. Philippe faltered momentarily before doubling down, desperation overriding his sense of danger. "Not until she admits the truth. Tell them who really created the recipes that made you famous for one night." Astrid straightened her spine, finding strength in the truth when nothing else remained. "Every dish tonight came from my own experience and training," she stated clearly, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Liar," Philippe shrieked, raising his hand as if to strike her. The motion was arrested mid-air, as Nikolai caught his wrist in a grip that made the former chef's face drain of color instantly. "Let me clarify something for you," Nikolai said to Philippe, his voice a controlled whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the now silent dining room. His grip on the former chef's wrist remained unyielding, forcing Philippe to release Astrid. Security personnel moved forward with practiced efficiency, flanking Philippe without touching him, creating an unspoken boundary that even in his drunken state he recognized as dangerous to cross. Sweat beaded on his forehead as reality began penetrating his rage. "When I say she's mine, I'm not claiming ownership of a person," Nikolai continued, releasing Philippe's wrist with a slight push that caused him to stumble backward. "I'm recognizing talent that belongs under my professional protection." Ms. Kasov, the striking businesswoman, tapped a manicured nail against her water glass, drawing attention with the delicate sound. "The bass was extraordinary," she stated with cool precision. "I haven't tasted its equal since Barcelona." The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly with her intervention, redirecting focus from confrontation to culinary appreciation. Felipe's face contorted with fresh humiliation, as his professional competence, rather than Astrid's, became the implicit comparison. "Each dish tonight told a story," another guest added, a silver-haired man with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Not the performance cuisine so common these days, but something with genuine heart. Philippe's shoulders slumped as the unified front of appreciation formed around him, his momentary power evaporating in the face of authentic praise for his former subordinate. The security team used this deflation to guide him toward the exit with minimal contact. "This incident is concluded," Nikolai announced to the room at large, his tone suggesting this statement was fact rather than prediction. He turned to Astrid, whose face still burned with the lingering sting of public accusation. "Would you do us the honor of explaining the dessert course personally?" he asked, the invitation serving multiple purposes, restoring her professional dignity, integrating her into the gathering, and smoothly transitioning past the disruption. Astrid took a steadying breath, channeling her grandmother's calm wisdom about handling life's storms with grace. "I'd be happy to," she replied with more composure than she felt, moving toward the kitchen to retrieve the dessert that had survived Philippe's rampage. In the kitchen, staff had already begun restoring order, cleaning broken dishes and salvaging what components they could. They stepped back respectfully as Astrid entered, their expressions communicating solidarity without requiring words. The pastry chef, a young woman with vibrant blue hair partially hidden under her chef's hat, approached with a small miracle. She had managed to protect 3 perfect chocolate sculptures from Philippe's destruction. "We can plate 8 desserts from what we saved," she whispered. Astrid nodded gratefully, immediately adapting her presentation plan to the new circumstances. "We'll serve family style instead of individual plates," she decided, quickly arranging the rescued components onto serving platters. When she returned to the dining room carrying the reimagined dessert, conversations had resumed with deliberate normality. Nikolai stood to assist her, his subtle support communicating volumes without drawing attention to her potential discomfort. "Before Chef Philippe's unexpected visit," Astrid began, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I had planned individual servings of this chocolate composition. Instead, I invite you to share it as one might in a home, passed among friends rather than served to strangers." Ms. Kasov's eyebrow arched with interest, her calculating expression warming fractionally as she assessed Astrid with newfound curiosity. "Adaptation under pressure, perhaps the most essential skill in any profession," she noted approvingly. The silver-haired man served himself a portion of the dessert with appreciative murmurs. "Sometimes the most memorable meals come from necessity, rather than perfect execution," he observed, raising his spoon in a small salute to Astrid. As the guests enjoyed the dessert, Nikolai guided Astrid to an empty chair that a server had discreetly added to the table. "Join us," he said simply, the invitation neither a request nor command, but something between, an acknowledgement of her rightful place. The conversation flowed around business matters that Astrid couldn't fully follow. Shipping routes, regulatory challenges, market expansions in territories she'd never visited. She remained quiet, absorbing the rhythms of power exchanged through careful words. Ms. Kasov turned to Astrid during a natural pause in the discussion. "The food industry can be particularly cruel to outsiders," she observed with the directness of someone who had navigated similar waters. "Yet you've maintained your distinctive voice despite it." "Voice is the only thing that can't be taken unless surrendered," Astrid replied, surprised by her own philosophical response to this intimidating woman. "My grandmother taught me that before she died." The table fell silent for a moment, the unexpected depth of her answer creating a brief space for reflection. Nikolai watched the interaction with interest, his usual mask of neutrality softened by something resembling approval. "Your grandmother was wise," Ms. Kasov acknowledged with a slight incline of her head. "I would have enjoyed meeting her." The comment wasn't mere politeness, but a genuine recognition of the influence that had shaped Astrid's talent. As the evening drew to a close, the guests departed with respectful nods to both Nikolai and, surprisingly, to Astrid herself. Their acknowledgement, from people who likely didn't bother remembering most service staff they encountered, felt like an unexpected validation. When only Nikolai and Astrid remained in the private dining room, he poured a small measure of cognac into 2 crystal glasses. To professional courage, he proposed, raising his glass in a toast that acknowledged her composure during Philippe's attack. Astrid accepted the glass, the amber liquid catching the light as she considered how dramatically her life had changed in less than 48 hours. "I still don't understand why you intervened last night," she admitted, asking the question that had lingered since their first encounter. Nikolai considered her question as he led the way toward the rooftop terrace, the same location where they had first spoken the previous evening. The night air carried the salt scent of the Atlantic, cooler now as autumn tightened its grip on Newport's coastline. "Talent recognizes talent," he finally answered as they emerged onto the moonlit space. "But more importantly, injustice that goes unchallenged only grows stronger with each victory." Astrid wrapped her arms around herself against the ocean breeze, her chef's jacket insufficient protection against the night chill. Without comment, Nikolai removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the lingering warmth and subtle scent of his cologne enveloping her. "You could have simply left a generous tip or complimented the meal," she pointed out, pulling the jacket closer despite herself. "Instead, you dismantled a man's career and altered my life trajectory in the span of 5 minutes." Nikolai leaned against the terrace railing, his profile outlined in silver by the moonlight reflecting off the water below. "Philippe destroyed his own career through years of abusive behavior. I merely provided the catalyst for inevitable consequences." The distant lighthouse beam swept across the horizon in rhythmic intervals, a silent guardian for ships navigating dangerous waters. Astrid found herself mesmerized by its steady pattern as she considered his words. "You still haven't explained what you meant when you said she's mine," she pressed, needing clarity about his intentions before proceeding further into whatever arrangement was forming between them. "Those words carry weight, especially from someone like you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he gazed out toward the darkened horizon. "Someone like me? And what sort of person do you believe me to be?" Astrid Novak from Millfield, Massachusetts. The specificity of her hometown startled her. She had never mentioned Millfield to him or anyone at the Ocean View Hotel. The casual revelation of this knowledge was clearly intentional, a gentle reminder of his resources and reach. "Someone with enough power to know everything about me while I know almost nothing about you," she answered honestly, refusing to be intimidated by the information imbalance. "Someone who operates by different rules than ordinary people." Nikolai turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she had yet witnessed. "A fair assessment," he acknowledged without defensiveness, "though the rules I follow are actually stricter than those binding ordinary people, as you put it." The rooftop heating lamps created islands of warmth amid the autumn chill, their glow softening the sharp edges of what might otherwise have been an intimidating conversation. Astrid moved closer to one, drawn to its comfort. "I recognize in you something rare," Nikolai continued, choosing his words with deliberate care. "Not just culinary talent, which is valuable but not unique, but an authenticity that cannot be fabricated or trained." A server appeared with 2 steaming cups of tea, set them on the small table between the terrace chairs, and disappeared before either could acknowledge the service. Astrid wondered briefly if the staff anticipated their needs, or simply followed Nikolai's advance instructions. "The restaurant business runs on exploitation," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm teacup. 12-hour shifts, verbal abuse, physical exhaustion, all accepted as paying dues for the privilege of eventually doing the same to others. Nikolai nodded, his expression suggesting intimate familiarity with systems built on suffering. "Most industries operate on similar principles, though perhaps with less shouting and more paperwork," he observed dryly. The tea was a complex herbal blend that tasted of mountain meadows and honey, nothing like the generic bags Astrid kept in her apartment. She savored it, allowing the warmth to spread through her before continuing. "What exactly are you offering me, Nikolai?" she asked directly, tired of metaphors and implications. "A job? Protection? Something else entirely?" The question hung between them, unavoidable and necessary. "Initially, a choice," he replied with equal directness. "I own several restaurants across the East Coast that would benefit from your talent, but I also have connections with culinary schools, if education interests you more than immediate employment." Astrid studied him over the rim of her teacup, searching for hidden agendas in his carefully neutral expression. "And what would you expect in return for this generosity?" "Loyalty," he answered without hesitation. "Not blind obedience or compromising your principles, but the basic understanding that actions have consequences within my organization." The lighthouse beam swept across the water again, momentarily illuminating the waves below before returning them to darkness. Astrid felt a strange kinship with those alternating states of visibility and shadow. "I don't have a permanent address at the moment," she admitted, the practical reality of her situation cutting through philosophical considerations. "My apartment lease was tied to my position at the restaurant, and they'll expect me to vacate now that I'm no longer employed there." Nikolai absorbed this information with a slight nod, as though confirming something he'd already suspected. "The hotel suite is yours for as long as you need while considering your options," he stated matter-of-factly. The casual generosity both relieved and unsettled her. The ease with which he solved problems that had seemed insurmountable just days ago highlighted the vast difference in their positions. "And if I choose to walk away entirely?" she asked, testing the boundaries of his offer. "Then I would provide references and connections to ensure you find suitable employment elsewhere," he replied without pause. "Your talent deserves recognition regardless of our potential association." Astrid fell silent, trying to reconcile her instinctive wariness with the undeniable opportunity before her. The moonlight cast strange shadows across the terrace, transforming the ordinary into something mysterious and slightly dangerous. "You don't trust easily," Nikolai observed, his tone suggesting approval rather than criticism. "That's wise, especially given your current circumstances." A seagull landed on the terrace railing, its white feathers ghostly in the moonlight, as it regarded them with beady indifference before taking flight again. Astrid watched it disappear into the night, envying its freedom. "I'd like to see one of your restaurants," she decided suddenly, setting down her teacup with newfound resolution. "Not as a customer, but behind the scenes, how your kitchens operate, how staff is treated, the real culture beyond surface appearances." Surprise flickered briefly across Nikolai's features before he nodded in agreement. "A reasonable request. I can arrange visits to several locations beginning tomorrow if you wish." The wind picked up, carrying whispers of approaching rain as clouds began obscuring the stars overhead. Astrid shivered slightly, despite the heating lamp's efforts, and Nikolai's jacket still draped around her shoulders. "It's getting late," he observed, gathering their empty teacups and placing them on a service tray. "We can continue this discussion tomorrow after you've had time to rest and consider." As they walked toward the rooftop exit, Astrid stopped suddenly, turning to face him with newfound determination. "One more question," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "Do you always rescue strays, or was there something specific about my soup?" "Neither," Nikolai answered after a thoughtful pause, his eyes reflecting something vulnerable that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "It was the honesty in your cooking, a rare quality in any field, but especially mine." Morning arrived with a gentle knock at Astrid's suite door, revealing a personal assistant who introduced herself as Kira, a petite woman with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. "Mr. Volkov arranged a car for your restaurant tours today, if you're still interested." Astrid found clothing laid out for her, not Chef White's, but well-tailored casual attire in her exact size, with a note explaining that kitchens would provide appropriate uniform when they arrived. The thoughtfulness was both impressive and mildly unsettling. The black SUV waiting outside the hotel featured tinted windows and a driver who nodded respectfully, but offered no conversation as Astrid settled into the leather seat. Kira joined her, tablet in hand with their itinerary already displayed on screen. "We'll visit 3 locations today," Kira explained, her voice professionally neutral, beginning with Oceano in Providence, then Tavola in Boston, concluding with Bleu in Portland. Each represents a different concept within Mr. Volkov's restaurant portfolio. The highway unfolded before them, Rhode Island's autumn landscape a blur of rusted oranges and deep reds against the gray morning sky. Astrid watched silently, processing the surreal turn her life had taken in the span of 72 hours. Oceano appeared first, a sleek seafood restaurant overlooking Providence Harbor, its glass exterior reflecting the water like a mirror. From the outside, it projected precisely the upscale dining experience one would expect from a Volkov establishment. Kira led her through the service entrance, bypassing the polished public spaces for the heart of the operation. Unlike the chaotic kitchen Astrid had grown accustomed to, this one operated with surprising calm, staff communicating in low, respectful tones. The executive chef, a woman in her 40s with a streak of silver in her dark hair, greeted Astrid with a handshake, rather than the territorial suspicion she had expected. "Clarissa Wong," she introduced herself. "Nikolai mentioned you might visit today." "He didn't explain why I'm here," Astrid admitted, watching as prep cooks efficiently broke down fresh fish delivered that morning. The kitchen layout struck her as unusually spacious, designed for movement rather than cramped efficiency. Chef Wong smiled knowingly, leading Astrid deeper into the kitchen. "He rarely explains his intentions fully. Observation is more valuable than explanation in our line of work." The morning staff meeting revealed another surprise. Instead of a hierarchical briefing, Chef Wong led an open discussion about the previous night's service, soliciting feedback from every station. Line cooks spoke freely about challenges and successes, without fear of retribution. "We maintain a zero-tolerance policy for abuse," Chef Wong explained as they toured the dry storage areas, which were immaculately organized. "Nikolai believes creativity flourishes under respect, not fear, a philosophy that initially seemed radical in this industry." Staff meals provided another revelation. The quality and care matched what was served to guests, with family-style seating that included all employees regardless of position. Astrid noticed the chef herself sitting beside dishwashers, engaging in casual conversation. Similar patterns emerged at Tavola in Boston, though the concept differed dramatically. An Italian eatery focused on regional specialties rarely seen outside their provinces of origin. The kitchen culture, however, maintained the same respectful efficiency she'd witnessed in Providence. By the time they reached Blow in Portland, Maine, Astrid had begun to recognize the underlying principles connecting Nikolai's seemingly diverse establishments. Each operated on a foundation of mutual respect, shared knowledge, and genuine passion for culinary excellence. The executive chef at Bleu, a former French laundry sous chef named Pierre Dumont, spoke of Nikolai with unusual candor as they toured his kitchen. "He saved me when addiction nearly destroyed my career," he confided quietly. "Second chances are rare in our world." As sunset painted the Portland harbor in watercolor hues, Astrid and Kira began the journey back to Newport. "What did you think?" Kira asked, the first personal question she'd ventured all day. "They're unlike any restaurants I've worked in," Astrid admitted, watching fishing boats returning to harbor with their daily catch. "The atmosphere, the respect, the complete absence of the toxic behaviors I thought were industry standards." Kira nodded, something almost like pride crossing her typically neutral expression. Nikolai believes sustainable excellence requires sustainable human practices, revolutionary in some industries, but particularly in food service. The highway miles passed in companionable silence, as Astrid processed everything she had observed. The consistency across locations suggested genuine organizational values, rather than performance for her benefit, which shifted her perspective significantly. Back at the Ocean View Hotel, Kira led her not to her suite, but to the rooftop terrace where Nikolai waited with dinner laid out. A simple spread of local seafood, fresh bread, and wine. "I thought you might be tired of restaurants after today," he explained. "I have questions," Astrid stated as she took the offered seat, accepting a glass of white wine that caught the last golden rays of sunlight. The day of observation had only deepened her curiosity about this enigmatic man and his operations. Nikolai gestured for her to continue, his expression open in a way she hadn't previously witnessed. "I expected nothing less. Ask anything you wish. Your restaurants operate on principles that most of the industry considers financially impossible," she began, selecting her words carefully. "No extreme overtime, fair wages, respectful environments, quality staff meals. How is this sustainable?" "Conventional wisdom often confuses impossible with inconvenient to profit margins," he replied, breaking bread with practiced hands. "My businesses are profitable, just not exploitatively so." Astrid considered this as she sampled the perfectly grilled scallops on her plate. "The chefs I met today spoke about you with genuine loyalty, not fear. That's unusual in any business relationship, especially at their level. Fear is a useful tool for immediate compliance, but destroys innovation over time," Nikolai responded, watching a seagull circle overhead. "I prefer sustainable relationships built on mutual benefit and respect." The conversation continued as twilight deepened around them, touching on culinary philosophy, business ethics, and the state of the restaurant industry. As they spoke, Astrid found herself increasingly curious about the man behind the power and reputation. "Why food?" she finally asked, the question that had lingered throughout the day. "With your resources and connections, you could operate in any industry. Why restaurants specifically?" Nikolai's expression softened in the gathering darkness. illuminated now only by the terrace lanterns swaying gently in the evening breeze. "Food was safety in my childhood," he answered with unexpected candor. "When nothing else was certain, my mother ensured we ate." The vulnerability in his admission created a shift in the atmosphere between them, a momentary connection beyond their professional dynamic. Astrid recognized the universal truth in his words, how nourishment represented far more than mere calories for those who had known hunger. "Tomorrow you'll meet with my business manager to discuss potential positions," Nikolai continued, redirecting the conversation to practical matters. "Consider tonight which environment most appealed to you during today's tours." The following morning arrived with rainfall that transformed Newport into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. Astrid watched droplets trace patterns down her suite window, contemplating the decision before her with newfound clarity after yesterday's observations. Kira arrived precisely at 9, today accompanied by an elegant older woman introduced as Mrs. Levine, Nikolai's chief financial officer. Her silver hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed shrewd eyes, accustomed to evaluating assets and opportunities. "Nikolai speaks highly of your potential," Mrs. Levine began once they were seated in a private conference room, spreadsheets and contracts arranged neatly before her. "He's authorized several possible arrangements depending on your interests." The options were outlined methodically: immediate placement as sous chef at any of his East Coast restaurants, funding for advanced culinary education at international institutions, or, most surprisingly, capital for her own small restaurant concept, with mentorship from his executive chefs. "These are generous offers," Astrid said carefully, studying the detailed documents before her. Each option included housing allowances, health benefits, and professional development funds that far exceeded industry standards. Mrs. Levine's expression remained professionally neutral, neither encouraging nor discouraging any particular path. "Nikolai invests in talent that aligns with his values. The specific form that investment takes is negotiable." Outside the conference room windows, Newport Harbor was barely visible through the rain, fishing boats and luxury yachts alike swaying with the incoming tide. The metaphor of navigating uncertain waters wasn't lost on Astrid, as she considered her options. "What does he expect in return?" she asked directly, having learned that clear communication was valued in Nikolai's organization, beyond loyalty, as he mentioned previously. Mrs. Levine folded her hands precisely on the polished table, her wedding band catching the light. 5 years minimum commitment to whichever path you choose. Regular progress reporting. Adherence to the ethical standards you observed yesterday. The door opened without warning, revealing Nikolai himself, today dressed in casual attire that somehow did nothing to diminish his authoritative presence. "Mrs. Levine explains the practical aspects admirably, but perhaps I should address the philosophical ones." He took a seat at the conference table, nodding for Mrs. Levine to remain as he turned his attention to Astrid. "I invest in people who demonstrate exceptional skill combined with authentic character. Both are equally important." Astrid considered him thoughtfully, her initial intimidation now tempered by their conversations and what she had observed of his business practices. "And if our values eventually diverge, what happens then?" "Then we part ways amicably, with you retaining the skills and connections developed during our association," he answered without hesitation. "I seek partners, not prisoners, Ms. Novak." The rain intensified outside, droplets now pounding against the windows with renewed determination. In the momentary silence, Astrid made her decision, not from desperation or gratitude, but from careful evaluation of the opportunity before her. "I'd like to accept the sous chef position at Oceano," she stated, her voice steady with newfound confidence. Chef Wang's approach resonated with me, and I believe I have much to learn from her perspective. Nikolai nodded once, the gesture conveying satisfaction without surprise, as though he had anticipated her specific choice. "Excellent. Mrs. Levine will finalize the arrangements while you prepare for relocation." The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Paperwork completed, personal belongings retrieved from her former apartment, housing secured near the restaurant in Providence. Throughout the process, Nikolai remained present, but unobtrusive, ensuring smooth transitions without micromanaging details. On her final evening in Newport, Astrid found herself once again on the rooftop terrace, where her unusual journey with Nikolai had begun. The storm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and a crisp autumn chill that hinted at winter's approach. "Providence is only 40 minutes from Newport," Nikolai observed as he joined her at the railing, respecting the contemplative silence that had surrounded her arrival on the terrace. "This needn't be a final farewell to the ocean view you've come to appreciate." Astrid smiled slightly, recognizing his subtle invitation for continued connection beyond their formal arrangement. "I've been thinking about that first night, when you asked if I always cook like that when I'm sad." The lighthouse beam swept across the horizon, a steady rhythm against the darkening sky. Nikolai waited for her to continue, his patience one of the qualities she had come to appreciate most about him. "My cooking has always been influenced by my emotions," she admitted, watching boats navigate the harbor below. "But I'm curious to discover what flavors emerge when working from a place of possibility rather than survival." Nikolai considered her words with the seriousness they deserved. "That's perhaps the most important discovery any artist makes, the evolution of expression beyond reaction to circumstance." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. Astrid realized with mild surprise that she no longer felt intimidated by his presence or position. Respect remained, but fear had dissipated through understanding. "I've arranged a weekly dinner," Nikolai mentioned as they prepared to leave the terrace. "Each Wednesday evening at Oceano, the table overlooking the harbor will be reserved. Sometimes I'll join you, sometimes not, but the reservation remains." The gesture struck Astrid as perfectly calibrated, maintaining connection without imposing obligation, providing structure while respecting independence. "I'd like that," she replied simply, accepting the boundary-defined relationship he proposed. When morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through her suite windows, Astrid found herself ready to embrace the next chapter, with clear-eyed determination. The car Nikolai had arranged waited below, prepared to transport her to Providence and her new beginning. 3 months into her position at Oceano, Astrid had established herself as an integral part of Chef Wong's kitchen. The transition from anonymous line cook to respected sous chef hadn't been without challenges, but the culture Nikolai had cultivated provided fertile ground for her growth. December transformed Providence into a postcard of New England winter charm, the harbor waters darkening to steel blue as holiday lights reflected off their surface. Astrid found herself appreciating the city's historic architecture during her morning walks to the restaurant. The Wednesday dinner tradition continued without fail, sometimes with Nikolai present, other times with only a handwritten note awaiting her at the reserved table. Today marked the 12th such dinner, coinciding with the first significant snowfall of the season. Astrid arrived early, using the quiet hour before service to review the special tasting menu she had designed for the evening. Chef Wong had gradually increased her creative responsibilities, allowing her to showcase her evolving culinary voice through seasonal offerings. Nikolai appeared precisely at 7, snowflakes still clinging to his coat as he entered the nearly empty dining room. Winter suited him somehow, his natural reserve harmonizing with the season's quiet intensity. "I brought something for you," he said, after they had exchanged greetings, placing a carefully wrapped package on the table between them. The paper was simple brown craft, tied with twine in a utilitarian rather than decorative manner. Astrid unwrapped it carefully to reveal a worn cookbook, its spine cracked from use and pages stained with evidence of countless meals. Opening the cover revealed handwritten notes in Cyrillic script, delicate annotations filling the margins around printed recipes. "My mother's," Nikolai explained, watching her handle the book with appropriate reverence. She documented her adaptations when ingredients weren't available in the Soviet Union, creative substitutions born of necessity rather than experimentation. The gift's significance wasn't lost on Astrid. This was no casual offering but a piece of personal history, a window into the foundations that had shaped his understanding of food and survival. She closed the book gently, meeting his gaze with genuine appreciation. "Tell me about her," she requested, setting the cookbook aside with care. In their months of acquaintance, Nikolai had shared business philosophies and industry insights, but offered few glimpses into his personal history. Something shifted in his expression, a momentary calculation visible in his eyes before he made a decision. "She was a research chemist before the collapse," he began, his accent thickening slightly with memory. "Afterward, she cooked in a government official's home to support us." As their first courses arrived, Nikolai continued the story he had never shared in their previous conversations. His mother, once respected in academic circles, had reinvented herself when political upheaval destroyed her former life, using her scientific precision to elevate simple ingredients. She approached cooking like chemistry, precise measurements, controlled variables, predictable results, he explained, sampling the scallop crudo Astrid had prepared. But she added something science couldn't teach, the intangible element that transforms technique into art. The restaurant gradually filled around them, but their corner table remained a private island in the busy room, staff instinctively maintaining their bubble of conversation. Astrid listened with full attention, as Nikolai revealed more of himself than he had in all previous encounters. "We came to America when I was 14, he continued, winter light from the harbor reflecting in his eyes. She worked 3 restaurant jobs while pursuing citizenship, breakfast shifts, lunch service, dinner prep, often sleeping only 4 hours between them. Astrid recognized in his story echoes of her own grandmother's sacrifice. Different circumstances, but similar determination to create stability through relentless work. "She sounds remarkable," she offered simply, understanding how inadequate words were for honoring such resilience. "She died before witnessing my success," Nikolai said after a thoughtful pause, the statement delivered with quiet factuality that couldn't quite disguise the underlying regret. A simple infection became pneumonia, because she couldn't afford to miss work for a doctor's visit. The revelation hung between them, illuminating his business practices in new light, the comprehensive health care for all employees regardless of position, the insistence on reasonable hours, and sick leave without penalty. These weren't abstract principles but lessons written in personal loss. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident," Astrid found herself sharing in return, offering her own vulnerability as acknowledgement of his trust. She had been a cook at a local diner for 40 years, with hands perpetually smelling of onions and love. Nikolai listened with the same focused attention he gave to business negotiations, absorbing her history without interruption. The symmetry of their shared losses created an unexpected bridge between their disparate worlds. Winter twilight cast long shadows across the restaurant, as Astrid described her grandmother's small kitchen, where spices were stored in repurposed jars, and recipes existed only in memory. The cramped space had taught her economy of movement and resourcefulness that even culinary school couldn't improve upon. Her grandmother's philosophy had been simple, yet profound. Food prepared without genuine care would never truly satisfy, regardless of expensive ingredients or technical perfection. Nikolai nodded in recognition, his own understanding of nourishment's deeper purpose aligning with this humble wisdom from a small-town diner cook. "She taught me that feeding people is a sacred responsibility," Astrid continued, memories surfacing that she rarely shared. Not just nourishing bodies, but seeing what each person needed in that moment. Comfort, celebration, courage, and providing it through food. Their main courses arrived. A venison preparation for Nikolai and butter-poached lobster for Astrid, both executed with the precision Chef Wong demanded. They paused their conversation to acknowledge the dishes before continuing their exchange of histories. "How did you transition from your mother's lessons to your current position?" Astrid asked, genuinely curious about the path that had transformed the immigrant teenager into the powerful figure seated across from her. Nikolai's expression darkened briefly, shadows of untold chapters flickering behind his eyes. "Not all stories are suitable for dinner conversation," he replied, the gentle deflection establishing a boundary she instinctively respected. Instead, he shared safer segments of his journey: culinary school funded by scholarships and night jobs, apprenticeships with demanding mentors, strategic investments in struggling restaurants where he recognized untapped potential. The narrative was truthful, yet clearly edited. Astrid recognized the careful curation of his history, the deliberate omission of chapters that likely contained difficult choices and moral compromises. Rather than pressing for details, she accepted the version he offered, understanding that complete transparency was neither possible nor necessary. Outside the restaurant windows, snow began falling in lazy spirals, each flake caught momentarily in the golden light before disappearing into accumulating whiteness. The weather created a cocoon of intimacy around their table, the rest of the dining room fading into comfortable background. Nikolai traced the rim of his wineglass with one finger, a rare gesture of contemplation that revealed momentary vulnerability. "Some nights, I still dream of my mother's kitchen," he admitted quietly. The scents, the sounds of her humming while she worked, memories more vivid than yesterday's meetings. "We're both products of kitchens that saved us," she observed as their dessert arrived. A simple but perfect crème brûlée with local berry compote. Different circumstances but similar sanctuaries. January arrived with bitter cold that transformed Providence Harbor into a landscape of ice floes and steel-gray water. Astrid had settled into a comfortable rhythm at Oceano, her responsibilities expanding as Chef Wong increasingly trusted her judgment and creativity. The weekly dinners with Nikolai continued, evolving into a space for both culinary discussion and personal connection that defied easy categorization. Neither romantic nor strictly professional, their relationship existed in a unique territory, defined by mutual respect and gradually deepening trust. Chef Wang is traveling to a food symposium next month, Astrid mentioned during their most recent dinner. She's asked me to oversee the kitchen in her absence. My first time running service independently. Nikolai nodded with evident approval, his confidence in her abilities apparent. "You're ready for the responsibility," he stated simply. No hint of doubt in his assessment. "The staff already looks to you naturally when challenges arise." The conversation shifted to a new supplier Astrid had discovered, a small farm practicing traditional Korean natural farming methods that produced exceptional vegetables even during winter months. Nikolai listened attentively, appreciating her initiative in developing relationships beyond established channels. They were enjoying coffee when Kira appeared unexpectedly at their table, her typically composed expression replaced with barely concealed tension. "There's a situation requiring your attention," she informed Nikolai quietly, placing a folded note beside his cup. The transformation was immediate. Nikolai's relaxed demeanor vanished as he read the note, replaced by the focused intensity Astrid had witnessed only in glimpses. Without explanation, he excused himself, following Kira toward the restaurant's private exit. Astrid remained at the table, unsettled by the abrupt departure and the subtle shift in atmosphere that accompanied it. The previously warm dining room suddenly seemed vulnerable, its elegant comfort revealing itself as merely a thin veneer over unknown complexities. 20 minutes passed before a server approached with a handwritten note. "Business matter requiring immediate attention. Car waiting to take you home if desired. Apologies for the interruption. N." The formal tone contrasted sharply with their earlier conversation. Despite the offer, Astrid chose to walk back to her apartment, using the bitter cold to clear her mind of unsettling possibilities. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she followed familiar streets, her breath forming clouds in the January air. Her phone chimed with a text from Chef Wang. "Security protocol activated at all locations. Stay aware of surroundings. Report anything unusual directly to Roland." The message triggered a cascade of questions. Who was Roland, and what situation warranted security protocols across multiple restaurants? Sleep eluded her that night, her mind cycling through fragments of conversations with Nikolai, searching for clues about the aspects of his business that remained deliberately obscured. By morning, she had reached no conclusions, but resolved to continue with normal operations unless instructed otherwise. Dawn brought frost patterns across her bedroom window, delicate crystalline structures that reminded her of the careful balance she now navigated between culinary ambition and unfamiliar complexities. She traced one icy formation with her fingertip, feeling its cold persistence against her skin. The morning staff meeting proceeded with superficial normality, though Astrid noticed subtle changes in security protocols. Delivery drivers now photographed and logged, unfamiliar faces politely redirected to the main entrance, staff schedules adjusted to ensure no one worked alone. These quiet adjustments spoke volumes about the seriousness of the unnamed threat. The restaurant operated with heightened vigilance over the following days. New faces appeared at service entrances and loading docks, professionally dressed individuals conducting quality inspections that clearly served alternative purposes. Staff whispered about heightened protocols without understanding their cause. Wednesday arrived without word from Nikolai, their usual dinner unclaimed, as Astrid sat alone at the reserved table. She ordered a single glass of wine, maintaining the tradition while wondering if its purpose had reached an unexpected conclusion. Her apartment felt particularly empty that evening, the winter wind whistling through old window frames as she reviewed recipes for the following day's service. The knock at her door came at 11:17 p.m., startling in both its lateness and its unexpectedness. Caution made her check the peephole before unlocking the door, revealing Nikolai standing in her hallway, his overcoat dusted with fresh snow, and his expression more serious than she had ever witnessed. "May I come in? I apologize for the hour." Her apartment suddenly seemed inadequate through his eyes. The mismatched furniture collected from thrift stores, cookbook collections stacked on makeshift shelves, kitchen equipment organized with more practicality than aesthetics. Yet Nikolai entered with the same respect he showed in five-star establishments. "There's a situation you should be aware of," he began without preamble, declining her offer of tea with a slight shake of his head. "It doesn't directly involve you, but proximity creates potential vulnerability." Cold anxiety pooled in Astrid's stomach at his words, the vague warning more unsettling than specific threats might have been. "What kind of situation?" Machi asked, maintaining outward composure despite her racing heart. A former business associate has resurfaced with grievances about our past arrangement, Nikolai explained, each word carefully selected. His approach involves targeting perceived vulnerabilities rather than addressing me directly. The implication crystallized in Astrid's mind. Her connection to Nikolai, however professional in nature, potentially placed her in the sightline of whatever conflict had emerged from his past. "You think he might approach me?" she asked directly. "It's a possibility I can't dismiss," Nikolai admitted, his expression revealing genuine concern beneath his typical reserve. "Security measures have been implemented at all locations, but personal vigilance remains essential until the situation resolves." Astrid processed this information with the same methodical approach she applied to complex kitchen challenges. What exactly should I be watching for? How would I recognize a potential threat? The refrigerator hummed in the background as Nikolai explained the psychology of indirect targeting, how adversaries often approached through seemingly innocent encounters rather than obvious confrontation. His knowledge on the subject revealed expertise beyond standard business acumen, hinting at experiences far removed from restaurant management. Astrid's culinary training had taught her to recognize subtle warning signs, the slight discoloration preceding spoilage, the faint aroma suggesting fermentation gone wrong, the almost imperceptible texture change signaling ingredient breakdown. Now she would apply that same observational precision to human interactions, watching for inconsistencies that might reveal hidden agendas. Nikolai leaned forward, his voice dropping to ensure privacy even within the empty apartment. "Unfamiliar contacts showing unusual interest in your routine or connection to me. Unexpected job offers. Anyone seeking information about restaurant operations or my whereabouts." The reality of Nikolai's world, the aspects that existed beyond elegant restaurants and culinary excellence, suddenly manifested in her modest living room. Astrid absorbed his warnings with the same focused attention she gave to complex recipes, memorizing essential elements. "I've arranged for a security consultant named Roland to be available to you at all times," Nikolai continued, sliding a business card across her coffee table. "The number connects directly to him, regardless of time or circumstance." February arrived with record-breaking cold, and Astrid's first week managing Oceano independently, while Chef Wong attended the culinary symposium in San Francisco. The responsibility both exhilarated and challenged her, each service testing her leadership capabilities. The security measures Nikolai had implemented remained discreetly in place, subtle adjustments rather than obvious precautions. Deliveries received additional verification, reservation systems underwent enhanced screening, and kitchen access became strictly regulated without disrupting normal operations. On Wednesday evening, with the restaurant closed for a private event, Astrid received a call from an unknown number. "This is Darius Fleming from Culinary Quarterly," a smooth voice explained. "We're featuring rising stars in the Northeast restaurant scene and would like to interview you tomorrow morning." Warning signals flashed immediately. The publication was legitimate, but the timing suspiciously convenient during Chef Wong's absence. "I'd be happy to participate with proper scheduling through our PR team," Astrid replied, maintaining professional courtesy while following Nikolai's protocols. The man's response confirmed her suspicions. Slight pressure for an immediate meeting, vague references to Nikolai's influence, subtle flattery about her rapid rise in the industry. She ended the call politely but firmly, immediately contacting Roland as instructed. "You handled it correctly," Roland confirmed after investigating. "Fleming doesn't exist at Culinary Quarterly. We've identified the caller as an associate of Victor Resnick, the former business partner Mr. Volkov mentioned." The incident reinforced the gravity of Nikolai's warnings, while simultaneously highlighting the effectiveness of his protective measures. Astrid continued her duties with heightened awareness, the kitchen becoming both sanctuary and potential vulnerability. The restaurant's rhythm provided strange comfort amid uncertainty, the predictable progression from prep to service to cleanup creating structure she could rely upon, while other aspects of her life seemed increasingly complex. Astrid found herself appreciating the kitchen's honest demands, where success and failure were immediately evident rather than concealed behind polite conversation. A delivery of rare winter mushrooms arrived from a forager Astrid had cultivated as a source, the earthy treasures nestled in moss-lined boxes like precious jewels. She incorporated them into a special appetizer that evening, finding creative focus a welcome distraction from security concerns and unanswered questions about Nikolai's absent presence. Chef Wong returned the following week, full of inspiration from the symposium and praise for Astrid's management during her absence. "Nikolai mentioned we should accelerate your development track," she commented casually during their post-service debrief. The statement caught Astrid by surprise. She hadn't spoken directly with Nikolai since his late-night warning, their weekly dinners temporarily suspended due to security concerns. "He's satisfied with my progress?" she asked, keeping her tone professionally neutral. Chef Wong's knowing smile suggested awareness of complexities beyond their immediate conversation. "More than satisfied. He's requested you design the full tasting menu for an important private dinner next weekend, something highlighting your personal culinary perspective." The assignment presented both opportunity and challenge. Creative freedom coupled with heightened expectations for an event clearly carrying significance beyond ordinary service. Astrid spent the following days developing a menu that balanced technical excellence with emotional resonance. Inspiration came from unexpected sources: her grandmother's approach to humble ingredients, Nikolai's mother's resourcefulness documented in her cookbook margins, techniques gleaned from Chef Wong, all synthesized through Astrid's evolving culinary voice. The menu gradually took shape as a narrative, rather than merely a sequence of dishes. The private dining room overlooking Providence Harbor underwent subtle transformation in preparation for the event, the usual elegant simplicity enhanced with thoughtful details: hand-blown glass water vessels, custom ceramics from a local artisan, linens in deep oceanic blues rather than traditional white. 3 hours before service, Roland appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression betraying unusual tension. "Change of plans," he announced, voice low enough to avoid staff overhearing. "Mr. Volkov requests the dinner be relocated to the Newport property immediately." Professional training kicked in as Astrid rapidly reorganized her plans, identifying which preparations could travel safely and which would require last-minute execution at the new location. Her team responded with similar efficiency, years of kitchen adaptability serving them well during the unexpected pivot. The convoy of vehicles, kitchen staff in one van, security personnel in another, Astrid with Roland in a sedan, traveled the coastal highway in silence, tension hanging in the air like the approaching snowstorm, forecasted for later that evening. No explanations were offered for the sudden change, and Astrid asked no questions. Newport's Ocean View Hotel welcomed them with heightened security presence, staff moving with practiced precision that suggested this wasn't their first emergency protocol activation. Astrid was escorted directly to the kitchen, where equipment had already been prepared according to her specifications. The familiar space where her journey with Nikolai had begun now seemed transformed by context and circumstance, the gleaming surfaces and professional equipment unchanged yet somehow different. Astrid centered herself with 3 deep breaths before directing her team to resume preparations. As service time approached, Roland reappeared with final instructions. 8 guests total, he informed her. Mr. Volkov requests you personally present each course and remain in the dining room between services, rather than returning to the kitchen. The unusual request, keeping her visible rather than sequestered in the kitchen, suggested her presence served some purpose beyond culinary presentation. Astrid changed into the chef's jacket provided for the occasion, noting its custom tailoring and subtle embroidery of her initials near the collar. When she entered the private dining room carrying the first course, the tableau before her clarified everything. Nikolai at the head of the table, flanked by Ms. Kasov and other familiar faces from their first dinner months ago. Directly opposite Nikolai sat an unfamiliar man whose calculating gaze immediately identified him as Viktor Resnick without introduction. The dining room's atmosphere carried an undercurrent of tension that reminded Astrid of thunderstorms approaching over the ocean, electricity hanging in the air before lightning revealed its full power. Crystal glasses caught the light like warning beacons as servers poured water with practiced precision, their movements deliberately unobtrusive. Viktor Resnick's presence commanded attention despite his deliberately understated appearance. Expensive clothing chosen for quality rather than ostentation, no visible jewelry beyond a vintage watch, his silver hair precisely cut. What distinguished him was his absolute stillness amid movement, a predator's patience that assessed everything while revealing nothing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nikolai announced as Astrid approached, his tone carrying the perfect balance of authority and hospitality. "Allow me to introduce Chef Astrid Novak, whose personal tasting menu we have the privilege of experiencing tonight." The tension in the dining room was palpable beneath the veneer of business courtesy, invisible currents of power and history flowing between Nikolai and Viktor as they exchanged polite greetings. Astrid maintained professional composure while presenting her first course, an elevated interpretation of her grandmother's fish soup, transformed through technique while honoring its humble origins. This opening course represents foundations, The essential flavors that shape our earliest understanding of nourishment, she explained, making deliberate eye contact with each guest, including Victor. Simple ingredients elevated through care rather than extravagance. Victor's assessment was immediate and calculating as he tasted the soup, his expression revealing nothing, while his eyes catalogued Astrid's every movement and interaction with Nikolai. The predatory attention confirmed everything she had suspected about the nature of this dinner. Between courses, Astrid remained in the dining room as instructed, standing slightly behind Nikolai's chair, in a position that declared affiliation, without specifying its exact nature. The conversation flowed around business matters discussed in deliberately vague terms: market territories, supply chain adjustments, partnership parameters. Ms. Novak's rapid advancement through your organization has been remarkable, Victor observed during a momentary lull, his accent thicker than Nikolai's, but similarly Eastern European. Such talent discovered by fortunate accident, I understand. The comment carried subtle implications, questioning both her qualifications and Nikolai's interest in her, while remaining superficially complimentary. Astrid maintained neutral professionalism as Nikolai responded with equal subtlety. Talent recognizes talent, Nikolai replied, using the same phrase he had shared with Astrid during their first private conversation. Though I find preparation typically creates the conditions for such fortunate accidents. Each subsequent course told a chapter of Astrid's culinary journey, from her grandmother's kitchen through years of professional development to her current evolution under Chef Wang's mentorship. The progression created a narrative beyond mere flavor combinations, revealing personal history through considered technique. The main course featured venison, prepared with techniques Astrid had learned from Chef Wang, accompanied by vegetables from the Korean natural farming supplier she had discovered. This represents present circumstances, she explained, honoring tradition while embracing new influences. Throughout the meal, Astrid observed the complex dynamics unfolding around the table, Ms. Kasov's calculating assessment, the silent communications between security personnel positioned discreetly along the walls, the measured intensity with which Nikolai and Victor maintained their polite facade. Your chef has extraordinary potential, Victor commented to Nikolai, while maintaining eye contact with Astrid. One wonders if her talents might flourish even further in a different environment, perhaps one with fewer constraints. The implication hung in the air, both threat and offer simultaneously, as Victor's gaze lingered on Astrid with unsettling intensity. For the first time, she fully comprehended the dangerous game being played beyond the culinary performance she was providing. Ms. Kasov intervened with practiced diplomacy, redirecting conversation toward neutral territory, with a question about sustainable fishing practices that allowed Astrid to showcase her knowledge while diffusing immediate tension. The businesswoman's sharp eyes communicated clear understanding of Victor's tactic and subtle alliance with Nikolai's position. Candlelight flickered across the hand-blown glass centerpieces, casting complex shadows that seemed to mirror the layered conversation unfolding around the table. Astrid noticed how security personnel repositioned subtly whenever Victor shifted in his chair, their movements casual yet precisely coordinated like dancers following unheard music. Astrid has full autonomy regarding her professional development, Nikolai replied, his tone pleasant while his eyes conveyed clear warning to Victor. Her current arrangement reflects her personal choice rather than obligation. The dessert course represented Astrid's boldest statement, a deconstructed version of the soup that had first connected her to Nikolai, transformed into sweet components that echoed the original while creating something entirely new. The conceptual connection wasn't lost on anyone at the table. This final course represents possibility, she explained, her voice steady despite the underlying tension. Familiar elements reorganized to create new experiences while honoring their origins. The end of one journey becoming the beginning of another. Victor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly as he recognized the symbolism in both her creation and explanation. A clear declaration of loyalty without subservience, of chosen alignment rather than coercion. His calculating eyes reassessed Nikolai with newfound understanding. The dinner concluded with apparent cordiality, business conversations reaching tentative resolutions that Astrid understood represented much more than the surface-level agreements discussed. Victor departed with his associates, the atmosphere lightening noticeably with their absence. Your menu spoke volumes beyond flavor, Ms. Kasov commented once the others had gone, remaining behind with Nikolai as Astrid supervised the kitchen cleanup. Particularly the final course, quite the elegant statement of position. Nikolai's slight smile acknowledged the observation without requiring further explanation. Astrid understands that true cuisine communicates on multiple levels simultaneously. Sensory experience inseparable from emotional resonance. When the kitchen team had departed, and only Nikolai, Ms. Kasov, and Astrid remained in the private dining room, the pretense of an ordinary business dinner was finally set aside. Victor received our message clearly, Ms. Kasov stated, her typically reserved demeanor relaxing slightly. The territorial dispute has been resolved for now, Nikolai confirmed, pouring small measures of cognac for the three of them. Your presence tonight contributed significantly to that resolution, Astrid. The realization of her role in the evening's choreography crystallized fully. She had been not merely chef, but living proof of Nikolai's values and influence, her voluntary loyalty demonstrating something Victor needed to understand about Nikolai's organization. I'd like to make a proposal, Nikolai said after they had sipped their cognac in momentary silence. Beyond your continued development at Oceano, I believe you're ready for expanded responsibilities within our restaurant group. The offer, when fully outlined, exceeded anything Astrid had anticipated. Oversight of menu development across multiple locations, equity partnership in a new concept restaurant, resources for research and development of her own culinary innovations. The scope reflected confidence in her abilities beyond traditional culinary boundaries. This isn't contingent on tonight's performance, Nikolai added, correctly reading her momentary hesitation. The timeline has simply accelerated based on Chef Wong's recommendations and your demonstrated capabilities these past months. Astrid considered the proposal with appropriate seriousness, recognizing both the extraordinary opportunity and the deeper integration into Nikolai's world it represented. Her decision would determine not just professional trajectory, but personal associations with their attendant complexities. I have one condition, she stated after careful consideration, meeting Nikolai's gaze directly across the table. Complete transparency regarding situations like tonight's. If I'm to be involved in aspects beyond culinary operations, I need to understand the full context. Ms. Kasov's eyebrow arched with interest, her assessment of Astrid visibly recalibrating at this negotiating stance. Nikolai's expression remained neutral, though something like approval flickered briefly in his eyes, before he nodded once in agreement. To new beginnings, then, he proposed, raising his glass in a toast that acknowledged their evolving partnership. The crystal caught the light as they brought their glasses together, the quiet sound marking a transition neither had anticipated when he first tasted her soup months ago. Thank you for joining us on this journey of unexpected connections. If you enjoyed this story of talent, transformation, and trust, please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to support more content like this. Your engagement helps me continue crafting stories that bring together the worlds of culinary artistry and unexpected alliances.